Hey friends, I'm Daniel Parker, and let me tell you, my life has taken a dramatic turn for the worse recently. I work as a project manager at a tech company, which keeps me pretty busy most days. But despite the long hours, I always made sure to prioritize my relationship with my wife, Amanda Parker. We met 5 years ago at a mutual friend's wedding. She was charming, funny, and had this magnetic energy that drew me in instantly. It wasn't long before we were inseparable that we dated for about a year before tying the knot. Our marriage started off strong, filled with laughter, adventures, and dreams of a bright future together. Amanda worked part-time as a freelance graphic designer, which gave her flexibility to pursue her passion projects while also being there for me when I needed her. Everything seemed perfect, or so I thought, but over the past few months, things have been different. Amanda's behavior started changing subtly at first, but soon it became impossible to ignore. She began coming home later than usual, often smelling faintly of cologne that definitely wasn't mine. When I asked where she'd been, she would brush me off with excuses like, "I stopped by the gym," or "I had a last-minute client meeting." The real kicker came one evening when I called her from a business trip, hoping to catch up after a long day. Instead of hearing her usual cheerful voice, I got voicemail. Odd, since she usually picks up right away. I tried again an hour later, still no answer. Finally, around midnight, she called back, sounding annoyed. "Daniel, can't you see I've been busy? Stop calling me every 5 minutes." That was the moment I realized something was seriously wrong. The Amanda I knew wouldn't snap at me like that without a good reason. Or maybe she would, because underneath that sweet exterior, she had started developing a bitch's side that only surfaced when she thought I wasn't paying attention. One night, a sudden event threw everything into chaos. I decided to surprise her by bringing home takeout from our favorite Italian restaurant. As I approached our house, I saw her car parked outside, but all the lights were off. Curious, I unlocked the door quietly and slipped inside. The living room was dark, but I could hear muffled voices coming from the kitchen. My heart raced as I crept closer, peering around the corner. There she was, sitting at the kitchen table with someone I didn't recognize, a young guy, probably in his early 20s, wearing a waiter's uniform. They were laughing and chatting intimately, their body language unmistakably close. My blood ran cold as I pieced it together. This was no ordinary friendship, this was betrayal. Before I could process what I was seeing, they both noticed me standing there. Amanda's face paled, and the waiter looked panicked. "Daniel, what are you doing here?" she demanded, her voice sharp and defensive that I couldn't believe it. All those nights she claimed to be working late, all those times she snapped at me for asking questions, it all made sense now. My mind raced with questions, but one thing was clear. My world had just shattered into a million pieces. The silence in the kitchen was deafening. Amanda's eyes darted between me and the waiter, her face a mask of guilt and panic. The guy, let's call him Jake, since that's what I later found out his name was, stood up awkwardly, clearly sensing he was intruding on something far more serious than he had bargained for. "Daniel, this isn't what it looks like," Amanda blurted out, her voice wavering. "Jake here is just a friend from work." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A friend from work?" I echoed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Really? Since when do you bring friends from work to our house at midnight?" Jake shuffled uncomfortably, glancing at Amanda as if seeking guidance. She shot him a look that said, "Get lost," and he quickly grabbed his jacket and muttered an apology before slipping out the door. The moment he left, the tension in the room escalated tenfold. "Amanda, what the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and disbelief. "Who was that guy?" She crossed her arms defensively, her eyes narrowing. "I already told you, Daniel. He's just a friend. We were talking about some freelance projects I'm working on." "Bullshit!" I exploded, slamming my hand on the table. "Don't lie to me. You've been acting weird for months, coming home late, smelling like cologne that isn't mine. And now this? You expect me to believe it's all innocent? Her expression hardened, and she gave me that same bitchy tone she'd been using more frequently lately. You're overreacting, Daniel. Can't I have any friends without you accusing me of cheating? Overreacting? I repeated incredulously. Are you kidding me? I come home to find you cozying up with some guy in our kitchen at midnight, and you say I'm overreacting? Before she could respond, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my recent calls. And by the way, where were you tonight? Because I called you several times and got nothing but voicemail. She hesitated, her eyes shifting nervously. My phone died. I didn't realize it until later. Liar. I shouted, my patience completely gone. You know what? I don't even care anymore. I saw enough tonight to know exactly what's been happening behind my back. With trembling hands, I stormed upstairs to our bedroom, feeling the weight of betrayal crushing down on me. I needed to get away from her, to think clearly. As I rummaged through my drawer for some clothes, I noticed something strange, a receipt from a restaurant I'd never heard of, tucked inside one of her drawers. My heart pounded as I picked it up, reading the date and time. It was from last week, around the same time she claimed to be working late. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. This wasn't a one-time thing, this had been going on for weeks, maybe even months. I felt like I was suffocating, the truth hitting me harder than I ever imagined possible. When I came back downstairs, Amanda was still sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale and drawn. She looked up as I approached, her eyes filled with a mix of defiance and fear. "What are you going to do, Daniel?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know yet," I replied, my voice cold and detached. "But I need answers, and I need them now." I stood there in the kitchen, staring down at Amanda, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "Start talking," I demanded, my voice low but firm. "Who is he, and how long has this been going on?" Amanda's eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape route, but there was nowhere to run. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself, but her hands trembled slightly, betraying her nervousness. "Daniel, please," she began, her voice softening, "you don't understand. It's not what you think." "Oh, really?" I shot back, my patience wearing thin. "Then explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been cheating on me with some waiter." Her jaw tightened, and she crossed her arms defensively. "It's complicated, okay? Jake and we just started talking after one of my freelance gigs. He seemed nice, and things kind of escalated from there." "Things escalated?" I echoed incredulously. "So, what, you just decided to have an affair with him because he seemed nice? Is that your excuse?" She looked away, avoiding my gaze. "It wasn't planned, Daniel. It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far." "But it did go this far," I said, my voice shaking with emotion. "You brought him into our home, Amanda. You lied to me, time and time again. How could you do this to us?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't buying it anymore. "Don't cry now," I snapped. "You had no problem lying to me before. Where were these tears when you were sneaking around behind my back?" "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you. I felt lonely, and Jake was there for me when you weren't." My stomach churned at her words. "Lonely? Are you serious? I work hard to provide for us, and I make time for you whenever I can. And yet, you still found someone else?" "It's not that simple," she insisted, her tone turning defensive again. "You're always so focused on your job, Daniel. You barely notice me anymore. I needed someone who would listen, someone who cared about me." "So, you cheated on me because you felt neglected?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "That's rich, Amanda. Real mature. She glared at me, her bitchy side rearing its ugly head once more. Don't act like you're the victim here. This isn't all on me. You've been distant for months, too busy with work to even acknowledge me half the time. That doesn't give you the right to sleep with another man. I shouted, my frustration boiling over. If you were unhappy, why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you tell me how you felt instead of running off with some guy? Because I knew you wouldn't understand, she yelled back, her face flushed with anger. You're so wrapped up in your own world that you wouldn't have listened anyway. The argument spiraled out of control, both of us hurling accusations and hurtful words at each other. But beneath the shouting, I could feel the weight of betrayal pressing down on me, suffocating me. No matter how much she tried to justify her actions, nothing could erase the fact that she had betrayed my trust in the most profound way possible. Finally, exhausted and emotionally drained, I sank into a chair, burying my face in my hands. I can't believe this is happening, I muttered, my voice hoarse. How am I supposed to move forward from this? Amanda sat across from me, her eyes red and swollen from crying. I don't know, Daniel, she admitted quietly. But I'm willing to try. If you'll let me. I looked up at her, searching her face for any sign of sincerity. But all I saw was the same woman who had lied to me, who had betrayed me, who had shattered everything we had built together. Could I ever trust her again? Did I even want to? That night, I barely slept. My mind was a chaotic whirlwind of emotions: rage, betrayal, sorrow, confusion, all swirling together in a toxic mix that made it hard to breathe. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Amanda and Jake sitting at the kitchen table, laughing and flirting like they had no care in the world. The weight of her deception pressed down on my chest, making it hard to think, let alone function. The next morning, I woke up feeling emotionally drained. Amanda had retreated to the guest room, and the house felt eerily quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for the inevitable explosion. I got out of bed, my body heavy with exhaustion, and wandered into the kitchen. There, on the counter, sat the receipt from the restaurant where Amanda had been meeting Jake. It mocked me, a tangible reminder of her lies. That I picked it up, staring at the date and time, trying to piece together how many other nights she had snuck out to meet him while I was oblivious. How many times had I called her, worried when she didn't answer, only to find out later that she was wrapped up in his arms. The thought made me sick to my stomach. Over the next few days, I found myself oscillating between anger and sadness. One moment, I was furious at Amanda's blatant lies and deceit. The next, I was mourning the loss of what we had once shared. Our marriage, which had started off so full of promise and love, now felt like a hollow shell, crumbling beneath the weight of her betrayal. That I tried to go about my daily routine, but everything seemed pointless. Work, which had always been a source of pride and accomplishment, now felt like just another distraction, something to keep my mind off the pain gnawing at my heart. Friends and family noticed the change in me, asking if everything was okay, but I brushed them off, not ready to face the reality of my situation just yet. One evening, after another long day of pretending everything was fine, I found myself at our favorite park, the same place where Amanda and I used to take walks and talk about our dreams. Back then, the future had seemed so bright, so full of possibilities. Now, every memory of those happier times felt tainted, like they belonged to someone else entirely. Sitting there on the same bench, I allowed myself to feel the full extent of my pain. Tears streamed down my face as I finally let go of the anger and frustration, replaced instead by an overwhelming sense of loss. It wasn't just the end of our marriage that hurt, it was the loss of trust, of faith in the person I once believed I knew inside and out. Time passed slowly, the sun setting over the horizon as I sat there, lost in thought. Eventually, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I hesitated before pulling it out, already knowing who it would be. Sure enough, it was Amanda. Amanda, Daniel, please come home. We need to talk. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to go back, to confront her again, to demand answers and explanations. But another part of me, the part that was still reeling from the discovery, knew that no amount of talking could fix this. Some things couldn't be undone, no matter how much you wished otherwise. I deleted the message without responding and put the phone back in my pocket. Instead of heading home, I decided to drive to my best friend's place. Chris had always been my rock, the one person I could turn to when things got tough. He'd understand, even if he couldn't fully comprehend the depth of my pain. When I arrived, Chris opened the door with a concerned look on his face. "Daniel? What's wrong?" I stepped inside, barely able to hold it together. "Amanda," I managed to choke out. She cheated on me." Chris's expression softened immediately. Without saying a word, he pulled me into a tight embrace, letting me cry on his shoulder like I hadn't done since I was a kid. For the first time since discovering the truth, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't alone in this mess. Over the next few days, Chris helped me process my emotions. We talked through everything: my anger, my sadness, my fear of what the future held. He reminded me that it was okay to grieve the loss of my marriage, that healing would take time, and that it was important to focus on my own well-being. But despite his support, the pain lingered. Every day was a struggle, a constant battle between wanting to forgive and move on, and the overwhelming urge to lash out in anger. I vacillated between rage and despair, unable to find any semblance of peace. Eventually, I realized that I needed to make a decision. Could I ever trust Amanda again, after everything she'd done? Was there any chance of salvaging what remained of our relationship, or was it time to cut my losses and walk away? The days turned into weeks, and the initial shock of Amanda's betrayal began to morph into a more settled, albeit painful, reality. I found myself oscillating between anger and sadness, often in the same hour. One moment, I was furious at her lies and deceit; the next, I was mourning the loss of what we had once shared. Chris continued to be my anchor through it all. He'd listen patiently as I rambled about my feelings, offering advice when needed, but mostly just being there for me. It was during one of these late-night talks that I finally started to consider what my next steps should be. "Daniel," Chris said gently, "you need to decide what you want. Do you want to try and fix things with Amanda, or is it time to move on?" I sighed heavily, rubbing my temples. "I don't know, man. Every time I think about forgiving her, I remember those nights she lied to me. But then, I also remember the good times, the love we shared. It's like I'm torn in two." Chris nodded thoughtfully. "That's understandable. But here's the thing: you can't keep living in this limbo. You need to make a choice, for your own sake." His words hit home. I couldn't keep going back and forth, letting the uncertainty eat away at me. I needed closure, one way or another. The following day, I decided to have a serious conversation with Amanda. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I knew we needed to talk things through if there was any hope of salvaging our relationship or ending it amicably. When I arrived home, Amanda was sitting on the couch, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mix of guilt and hope. "Daniel," she whispered, standing up slowly. "I've been waiting for you." I nodded curtly, motioning for her to sit back down. "We need to talk," I said firmly, taking a seat across from her. She nodded, clasping her hands tightly in her lap. "I know. I've been thinking about everything, and I really am sorry, Daniel. I never meant to hurt you." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. "Amanda, I appreciate that you're sorry. But apologies aren't enough anymore. What happened between you and Jake, it destroyed the trust one had in you. And trust is the foundation of any relationship." Tears welled up in her eyes again, but I pressed on. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, and I've come to realize something important. I need to know if I can ever trust you again. Can you honestly say that this affair is over? That there will be no more lies, no more secrets?" Amanda hesitated, biting her lip. "Yes," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's over, Daniel. I swear. I'll do anything to make it up to you, to rebuild our marriage. I stared at her, searching her face for any sign of sincerity. Part of me wanted desperately to believe her, to give us another chance. But the other part, the part that had seen the evidence, felt the pain wasn't so sure. I don't know if I can do that, Amanda, I admitted, my voice cracking. Even if you mean it now, how can I ever truly trust you again? How can I look at you without remembering what you did? Her shoulders slumped, and she let out a shaky breath. I understand, she said quietly. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't want to try. But please know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes, even if you decide it's not enough. We sat in silence for a long while, the weight of our conversation hanging heavy between us. Finally, I spoke again, my voice steady but laced with emotion. I need some time to think, Amanda. This isn't something I can decide right away. I need to figure out what's best for me, for both of us. She nodded slowly, wiping away her tears. Take all the time you need, Daniel. I'll respect whatever decision you make. As I left the house later that evening, I felt a strange sense of clarity. The decision wouldn't be easy, and it certainly wouldn't be quick. But for the first time since discovering the truth, I felt like I had a semblance of control over my life again. Over the next few weeks, I spent a lot of time reflecting on my marriage, on Amanda, and on myself. I talked to friends, family, and even a therapist to help sort through my feelings. Slowly but surely, a resolution began to form in my mind. One evening, after much contemplation, I realized something important. I couldn't stay in a relationship built on lies and mistrust. No matter how much I loved Amanda, the damage done was too great to repair. I needed to walk away, to start fresh and focus on healing. The next day, I called Amanda and asked her to meet me at a neutral location, a quiet cafe downtown. When she arrived, I could see the anxiety etched on her face, but I remained calm and composed. Amanda, I began, taking a deep breath, after a lot of thought and reflection, I've made a decision. I can't continue this marriage. The trust we once had is gone, and I don't think it can ever be rebuilt. Her face fell, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. Are you sure, Daniel? Is there really no way we can work through this? I shook my head sadly. I wish there was, but I've come to accept that this is what's best for both of us. We deserve better than a life filled with suspicion and doubt. She nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. I get it, she whispered. And I'm sorry, Daniel. Truly sorry. We parted ways that day with a sense of finality, though tinged with a bittersweet acceptance. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one for me. As I walked away from that cafe, a strange sense of peace washed over me. It was an odd feeling, given the circumstances. After all, I had just ended my marriage. But there was also a weight lifted off my shoulders, a release from the constant turmoil and uncertainty that had plagued me for weeks. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the emotional roller coaster, it was all still fresh in my mind, but now it felt like part of a chapter that was closing. And as I looked back, I realized that this experience had taught me some valuable lessons about love, trust, and resilience. The first thing I learned was the importance of honesty in a relationship. Amanda's affair wasn't just about her actions with Jake, it was about the countless lies she told to cover it up. Trust is fragile, and once broken, it's incredibly difficult to repair. Even if we had tried to work things out, I don't think I could have ever fully trusted her again. That lack of trust would have been a ticking time bomb, always threatening to explode at any moment. Another lesson I took away was the value of self-respect. For a while, I struggled with feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. Was I not good enough? Did I do something wrong? These thoughts gnawed at me, making me question my worth. But eventually, I realized that no one deserves to be treated the way Amanda treated me. No matter how much I loved her or how long we had been together, I deserved better than to be lied to and betrayed. Walking away from the marriage was an act of self-respect, a way of acknowledging that I deserved to be treated with honesty and respect. That I also learned the importance of support systems. Without Chris's unwavering support and the advice of friends and family, I don't know how I would have made it through those dark days. Having people who care about you and are willing to listen can make all the difference when you're going through something as painful as infidelity. They helped me process my emotions, offered guidance when I needed it, and reminded me that I wasn't alone. Lastly, I learned that healing takes time. There were moments when I thought I'd never get over the pain, that I'd be stuck in this cycle of anger and sadness forever. But slowly, day by day, I started to feel better. The intensity of the emotions lessened, and I began to see a future beyond the betrayal. It wasn't easy, and there were setbacks along the way, but I kept moving forward, one step at a time. The days following my decision to end the marriage were a mix of relief and anxiety. Relief, because I no longer felt trapped in a toxic cycle of lies and betrayal. Anxiety, because I was stepping into uncharted territory, a life without Amanda, a future that suddenly seemed wide open but also daunting. That I decided to take some time off work to focus on myself, something I hadn't done in years. It was during this period of self-reflection that I began to rediscover parts of myself that had been neglected over the course of my marriage. Hobbies I used to love, like painting and hiking, slowly made their way back into my routine. I joined a local gym, not just for physical health but as a way to clear my mind and relieve stress. One afternoon, while wandering through a bookstore, I stumbled upon a section dedicated to personal growth and self-improvement. A particular book caught my eye, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. As I flipped through its pages, I found comfort in its message about living in the present moment and letting go of past hurts. It resonated with me deeply, reminding me that this new chapter in my life was an opportunity to grow, not just a setback. With renewed determination, I started setting small goals for myself. I signed up for a pottery class at a nearby community center, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the time for. The tactile nature of working with clay provided a soothing escape from the mental chaos that had consumed me for so long. Each piece I created felt like a metaphor for my journey, one step at a time, shaping and molding until something beautiful emerged. During one of these classes, I met Sarah, a kind-hearted woman who shared my passion for creativity. We quickly bonded over our love for art and soon became friends. Unlike many of the people I knew, Sarah didn't pry or ask too many questions about my personal life. Instead, she offered a refreshing sense of normalcy, inviting me to join her and her friends for coffee outings and weekend hikes. It wasn't long before I found myself looking forward to these gatherings, appreciating the camaraderie and laughter they brought. For the first time in months, I felt a genuine connection to others, free from the weight of betrayal and mistrust. These new friendships helped me realize that life could still be fulfilling and joyful, even after such a devastating blow. As weeks turned into months, I gradually adjusted to my new reality. The initial pain of Amanda's betrayal still lingered, but it no longer consumed me. Therapy sessions continued to help me process lingering emotions, providing a safe space to vent frustrations and celebrate small victories. My therapist reminded me that healing isn't linear. It's okay to have good days and bad days, and progress takes time. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset, I reflected on how far I'd come. The man sitting there now was different from the one who had discovered his wife's infidelity months ago. He was more resilient, more self-aware, and more determined to live authentically. I realized that while I couldn't change the past, I could shape my future. The idea of dating again seemed both terrifying and exciting. Part of me was hesitant, worried about repeating old patterns or getting hurt again. But another part of me was curious. What if there was someone out there who truly valued honesty and trust? Someone who could bring joy and companionship into my life without the baggage of betrayal. A few weeks later, Sarah invited me to a casual get-together at her place. There would be other singles there, she mentioned casually, adding that it might be a good opportunity to meet new people. I hesitated at first, unsure if I was ready for that kind of social interaction. But then I thought about how far I'd come and decided to give it a shot. The night of the gathering arrived, and I found myself standing outside Sarah's house, nervously adjusting my shirt. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the door. Sarah greeted me with a warm smile, ushering me inside where the sounds of laughter and conversation filled the air. As the evening progressed, I found myself engaging in conversations with several interesting people. There was no pressure, no expectations, just genuine connections forming naturally. Towards the end of the night, I struck up a conversation with a woman named Lisa. She was witty, intelligent, and had a warmth about her that immediately put me at ease. We talked for hours, sharing stories and laughing together. When the evening came to a close, Lisa smiled and said, "We should do this again sometime." I nodded, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was room for new beginnings in my life. The days following the get-together at Sarah's were a whirlwind of emotions. On one hand, I was excited about the possibility of meeting someone new, someone who might bring joy and companionship back into my life. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the lingering doubts and fears that came with opening myself up to love again. Lisa and I exchanged numbers that night, and soon we started texting regularly. Our conversations were light and easy, filled with shared interests and mutual respect. It felt good to connect with someone on a personal level without the weight of past betrayals hanging over me. But as our interactions grew more frequent, so did my anxiety. One evening, while lying in bed, I found myself scrolling through old messages Amanda and I had exchanged during happier times. The contrast between those heartfelt exchanges and the lies she had told hit me like a punch to the gut. My heart raced, and a wave of nausea washed over me. How could I trust anyone again? What if Lisa turned out to be just like Amanda, charming and loving on the surface but deceitful beneath? I tossed and turned for hours, unable to shake these thoughts. Finally, I picked up my phone and dialed Chris's number. He answered groggily, his voice thick with sleep. "Daniel? Everything okay?" "Yeah, sorry for calling so late," I said, my voice shaky. I've been thinking about everything, and I'm not sure I can do this. What if I end up getting hurt again?" Chris sighed softly, understanding my turmoil. "Look, Daniel, I get it. Trust is hard to rebuild after something like what you went through. But you can't let fear dictate your future. You're stronger than that. But how do I know when it's safe to trust someone again?" I asked, frustration creeping into my tone. What if I miss the signs, or worse, ignore them because I want things to work out? Chris paused thoughtfully before responding. "Trust isn't about ignoring red flags, Daniel. It's about being aware and setting boundaries. You need to communicate openly with Lisa, share your feelings and concerns. If she's worth it, she'll understand and respect your need for honesty and transparency." His words struck a chord. Communication had always been a cornerstone of any healthy relationship, yet it was something Amanda and I had neglected. Maybe, just maybe, I could learn from that mistake and build something better this time around. The next day, I decided to have an honest conversation with Lisa. We met at a cozy cafe, the kind with soft lighting and the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. As we settled into our seats, I took a deep breath, preparing myself for what I needed to say. "Lisa," I began, my voice steady but laced with emotion, "there's something important I need to talk to you about." She looked at me curiously, her eyes warm and inviting. "Of course, Daniel. What's on your mind?" "Well, you know I've been divorced recently, right?" She nodded. "Yeah, you mentioned it briefly. Is everything okay?" "Well, the reason behind the divorce was infidelity," I admitted, feeling a lump form in my throat. "My ex-wife cheated on me, and it was really hard to deal with. I'm still working through some of the emotional fallout." Lisa's expression softened, and she reached across the table to gently take my hand. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that, Daniel. That must have been incredibly painful." "It was," I agreed, grateful for her empathy. And now, as I start thinking about dating again, I'm finding it difficult to trust people. I don't want to make the same mistakes, but I also don't want to let fear hold me back from potentially great relationships. Lisa squeezed my hand reassuringly. I completely understand. Trust is a big deal, especially after something like that. But I want you to know that I value honesty and openness. If there's ever anything you need to talk about, I'm here for you. And I promise to always be truthful with you. Her words brought a sense of relief. For the first time since the betrayal, I felt like I could breathe a little easier. Thank you, Lisa, I said, smiling gratefully. That means a lot to me. As our conversation continued, I realized that building trust wasn't about erasing the past, it was about learning from it and moving forward with intention. Lisa's willingness to listen and her commitment to honesty gave me hope that perhaps, in time, I could learn to trust again. Over the following weeks, Lisa and I grew closer, our bond strengthening with each passing day. We spent weekends exploring new places, trying new foods, and simply enjoying each other's company. With every shared experience, my walls began to crumble, bit by bit, but rebuilding trust wasn't without its challenges. There were moments when old insecurities would resurface, triggering waves of doubt and anxiety. One evening, Lisa received a text message that made her smile broadly. Without thinking, I blurted out, "Who was that?" She glanced at me, surprised by my sudden defensiveness. "It's just a friend from work," she explained calmly. "Why, are you worried?" I felt a flush of embarrassment wash over me. "I'm sorry," I muttered. "I didn't mean to pry. It's just, old habits, I guess." Lisa reached out and placed a gentle hand on my arm. "It's okay, Daniel. I understand. Just remember, I'm here for you, and I have nothing to hide. If you ever feel uncertain, just ask me. Communication is key." Her patience and understanding helped ease my worries. Slowly but surely, I learned to navigate the complexities of trust in a new relationship. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of vulnerability, but each step forward felt like progress. As the months passed, I found myself growing more comfortable with the idea of trusting Lisa and, more importantly, trusting myself. I realized that healing wasn't about erasing the pain of the past but about integrating those experiences into a stronger, wiser version of myself. As the seasons changed and my relationship with Lisa continued to flourish, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me here. It was a long and arduous path, filled with pain, self-doubt, and moments of sheer despair. But it was also a journey of growth, resilience, and ultimately, healing. One crisp autumn afternoon, I sat by a serene lake, watching the leaves change colors and fall gently into the water. The peaceful surroundings provided the perfect backdrop for some much-needed introspection. I thought about Amanda, about the betrayal that had shattered our marriage, and about how far I'd come since those dark days. Forgiveness wasn't something that came easily to me. For months, I wrestled with feelings of anger and resentment, unable to let go of the hurt she had caused. But as time passed, I began to understand that holding on to those negative emotions only served to prolong my own suffering. Forgiveness wasn't about excusing her actions or pretending they didn't matter, it was about freeing myself from the chains of bitterness. I decided to reach out to Amanda one last time, not to rekindle any old flames but to close the chapter once and for all. We met at a quiet cafe, much like the one where I had ended our marriage. She looked different, thinner, perhaps, and there was a weariness in her eyes that mirrored my own. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice tinged with regret. "How are you?" "I'm doing better," I replied honestly. "It's been a tough road, but I'm learning to move forward." She nodded, her gaze dropping to the table. "I'm sorry, Daniel. Truly sorry for everything. I never meant to hurt you the way I did." I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "I know you're sorry, Amanda. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about what happened. I can't pretend it doesn't still hurt, but I'm trying to forgive you, not for your sake, but for mine." Her eyes widened slightly, surprised by my candor. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." We talked for a while longer, reminiscing about the good times and acknowledging the mistakes we'd both made. There was no reconciliation, no attempt to relive the past. Instead, we parted ways with a sense of closure, knowing that we were both moving on in our respective journeys. As I left the cafe that day, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. Forgiving Amanda wasn't about condoning her actions, it was about releasing the hold she had over my emotions. By letting go of the anger and resentment, I was finally able to focus on my own well-being and happiness. Reflecting on the entire experience, I realized that life is full of unexpected twists and turns. Relationships aren't always easy, and sometimes they end in ways we never imagined. But through every challenge, there's an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. My divorce forced me to confront my deepest fears and insecurities, and in doing so, I emerged stronger and more self-aware. Lisa had played a significant role in my healing process. Her unwavering support, patience, and understanding helped me rebuild trust and open my heart again. Our relationship wasn't without its challenges, but we navigated them together, learning and growing along the way. With each passing day, I felt more confident in our bond and more hopeful about the future. If there's one piece of advice I could offer to anyone going through a similar situation, it would be this: take it one step at a time. Healing isn't linear, and there will be setbacks along the way. But with perseverance, self-compassion, and the right support system, it is possible to find peace and move forward. In the end, I learned that love and trust are precious gifts, ones that must be nurtured and respected. They require effort, communication, and a willingness to be vulnerable. While my marriage to Amanda ended in heartbreak, it also taught me invaluable lessons about what truly matters in life. As I walked away from the cafe that day, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Life had dealt me a difficult hand, but I had chosen to play it with strength and resilience. And while I couldn't predict what the future held, I knew that I was ready to embrace whatever came next on my own terms, with an open heart and a clear mind.